The 2020 World Junior Championships are now complete. Today we're going to recap the final day of the gold medal and bronze medal games, as well as discuss who were the top players of the tournament. We'll jump into that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, the 2020 World Junior Championships are now complete. We had a couple of final games here today. The bronze and gold medal and silver medals are all been handed out, and we also want to take a quick look at who were the top players named to the All-Star team for this tournament. Now, of course, the things kicked off today with the relegation game taking place between Kazakhstan and Germany, both fighting for the right to stay within the tournament. Germany did come out victorious, so Kazakhstan will be relegated to the Division 1A, so they'll be dropping down in division next year. And Austria, who had won the 1A division for the current year, will have the opportunity to move up and compete with the teams that we saw this year. So of course that happens every year. One team is relegated, another team is elevated, and I guess we'll see how they make out next year. So Kazakhstan will have to earn their way back to the tournament. So then that led us into the bronze medal game, which featured European rivals Sweden versus Finland. Sweden was able to overcome their defeat in the semifinals and come away with the bronze medal, defeating the Finns with a 3-2 score. Another tightly contested matchup, just like we saw in the round robin with these two countries. Of course, for the most part, they had a pretty solid tournament. Sweden certainly had some top players in this tournament as well, some very dynamic forwards. Of course, the Finns were battered and beaten up coming into the tournament without Anton Lundell. They lost Rasmus Kapari early, so they really did well, in my opinion, considering what their roster was and all the injuries they had to deal with. As defending champions, it's not easy to win this tournament 2 years in a row, which is why we don't see it happen very often, but still a valiant effort from both of these countries. Hopefully sometime soon Sweden comes through and wins a gold medal, considering that 52 consecutive games win streak they have in round robin play. It'd be nice to see them be rewarded more so in the medal rounds. And of course that led us to the main event of the day, the gold medal matchup, the rematch between Canada versus Russia. These two rivals have tons of history going back for the entire duration of this tournament. At one point in time, Canada and Russia were the two main powerhouses in hockey and on an international stage. Over time, we've seen countries like Sweden and Finland and the US kind of elevate themselves to be very comparable. And of course, they've had many opportunities to win over the years now as well. It's nice to see more countries be at that level, so there's more high-level competition. Certainly those big five going into this tournament every year are usually the leading contenders to possibly win. And a lot of people, myself included, thought that going into this year's tournament, it was a little bit of a toss-up. There really wasn't a clear-cut winner who was favored to win the gold medal. I thought Canada, the US, Russia, and even Sweden for the most part were likely having a good opportunity. I thought the Finns would have a good tournament as well, but I wasn't really sure they'd be able to repeat. I didn't think their roster looked quite as strong as it did the year prior. However, Canada and Russia did not disappoint. We had a very entertaining hockey game today. All kinds of great action, all kinds of penalties early on. The first period was dominated by Team Canada taking several penalties, heading to the penalty box. For the most part, I thought the calls were legit and good calls. There was one call in the first period that I didn't think was really a good call by the referees, but it's certainly no easy task. And the rules with the international competition is certainly slightly different than what many of you might be used to in the NHL as well. There's slight differences on a few things. Of course, finally, Russia strikes first on the power play. After all those penalties, they finally got burned with the power play goal. Team Canada let one in. Certainly was no fault to the goaltender. It was a good shot and 1-0 Russia. Canada gets a power play shortly thereafter and responds with a goal of their own. Dylan Cousins come through with a huge goal to tie things up for Team Canada. But from there, penalty trouble continued, back and forth play. But really, Russia ended up taking the next couple of goals. Next thing we know, we're getting up towards the halfway point of the third period. Russia scores again to take a 3-1 lead. That's where things really kind of turned, got interesting for sure. Not long after Russia takes a 3-1 lead, Canada does get one back to make it 3-2. A little bit of a bounce off Connor McMichael's leg. They did review the goal to make sure there was no kicking motion or that he did not purposely use his leg to kick the puck into the net, which is against the rules on the international stage, but it was ruled a good goal. It did go off, but basically his skate off his other leg and into the net. Certainly a little bit of a ping pong effect there, but certainly no kicking motion, nothing distinct or purposeful that was done. It was a little bit of good luck on McMichael and Canada's part, but at that point, Canada was certainly willing to take it. Later into the period, a few minutes later, Canada ends up on the power play again. As this period went on, the Russians certainly became less and less disciplined, taking some really unnecessary penalties, in my opinion, and Captain Barrett Hayton, who was a game-time decision, came through with a huge power play goal, even though he was battling through a grade 1 separated shoulder, which turned out to be the injury. He ended up rifling home the game-tying goal on the power play. You'd never know he was battling an injury the way he shot that puck today, but he certainly had a lot to go through, and he had quite a process as well to go through just to play. They had to put him through different strength and conditioning tests to make sure the shoulder was strong enough. They also had to get consent from his NHL club, the Arizona Coyotes, to sign off on him to be able to play, as well as his family. So he only found out about 15 or 20 minutes before game time that he was for sure in the lineup, even though he himself knew all day that he wanted to play, and he said during his interviews afterwards that he wouldn't miss that game for anything, but it wasn't entirely up to him. He needed doctors on his side as well as several others, as we later found out, but everything worked out, and Captain Canada was in the lineup and came through as a clutch, huge goal to tie things up later into the third period. Now, not too long after that, with about 4 minutes to go, we saw the game-winning goal from Akil Thomas, who had been really used rather sparingly by Coach Dale Hunter, was primarily a fourth-line player, hadn't scored yet in the tournament, which we've seen this kind of thing happen before, where players who had not had scored and not had played a big role came through clutch when it mattered most, and he scored a beautiful goal to beat the Russian goaltender. Except with about 4 minutes to go, he skated in, grabbed the puck, and got it into the net there. It was certainly a really nice play, a little bit unexpected, but Canada's back on top with 4 minutes to go, and at this point, the Russians are starting to look rattled. Now, later into the period, with a couple minutes left to go, there was a little bit of a controversial play where Team Canada shot the puck. It was going up over the glass and hit a camera going out of play. Now, normally, if that camera hadn't been there, it would have gone straight up over the glass, and it would have been a delay of game penalty, and that would have been clear cut, no question about it. But where it hit a camera, there was certainly some confusion over what the rule was or how this was going to impact things. At that point, the Russians had the goaltender out, and they could have ended up with a 6-on-3 if Canada had been penalized on the play. But the referees talked it over, and they did end up making the right call. And even though some people might not think it was the right call or that Canada got lucky, but I'm going to post out here a snippet from the rule book from the tournament rules, and you will see here that in actuality it says that if the puck goes out of play and hits any equipment, whether it be the scoreboard, score clock, or any kind of equipment at all, that it's not a penalty. So yes, it's a bit of a lucky break, I'll give you that. As a fellow Canadian, certainly happy to see a good break for our country, but at the same time, that is the rule, and so maybe you can debate whether or not the rule should be changed or should be different, but clearly they followed the rule to a T, and they did technically make the right call. So I'm not sure what your thoughts are on the rule. Feel free to leave a comment and let me know. The camera that it hit was a TSN camera from Canada as well, so maybe they end up playing a role here. Hard to say, but it's really, you can't really debate at this point whether or not that call or non-call or the fact that they followed the rule actually really made an impact here. Now, right after that, another play happened where Russian captain Grigory Denisenko ended up taking a very odd penalty, really unnecessary. He broke his stick, so they called him a minor penalty for using a broken stick. He should have dropped the stick immediately. And even as he got closer to the bench, he realized that they were calling the penalty, and he slammed the stick to the ice, which I guess they probably could have technically called an unsportsmanlike on that. But you could see that they were rattled, they were getting frustrated, and they were becoming very undisciplined, which is really a big part of what happened here and how Canada was able to come back in the third period with some great moments to take the victory. So all in all, we have a 4-3 Canada victory. Canada gets the gold medal. The Russians get the silver. Of course, Canada goes on to celebrate the victory. Captain Barrett Hayton was named player of the game. Of course, they also had a few Canadians named in the top players of the tournament. The All-Star game, which was voted on by the media covering the tournament, included 3 Canadians. Was also included Alexis Lafreniere and Barrett Hayton, both at the forward positions, as well as Samuel Fagemo of Sweden. The defensemen on the All-Star team were voted as Alex Romanov of Team Russia and Rasmus Sandin of Team Sweden. And Joel Holfer, the Canadian goaltender, was voted as the goalie for the All-Star team, with the forward Alexis Lafreniere being named Tournament MVP. Even though he missed a couple games with a knee injury, he certainly battled through it and was extremely dynamic and very crucial for Team Canada when he was in the lineup. He didn't have as big a role on the score sheet today as he has in some other games, but he was certainly a very dynamic player and certainly very important to them because of the amount of penalties that Canada took, especially in the first period and part of the second period. Lafreniere, who does not kill penalties, was not able to get on the ice as much, so he wasn't able to contribute quite as much as usual, but still played a role. And said that as a team, they managed to squeak out the victory here and come away the gold medalists. Now, of course, Canada will be hosting the tournament next year in Alberta. Edmonton Red Deer are sharing the hosting duties for the 2021 World Junior Championship. So it should be another great tournament back in North America next year. All kinds of great players showcased their talents at this tournament. Besides the players named to the All-Star team, there were certainly lots of other great performances. I think Vasily Podkolzin, top pick in the 2019 draft, Canucks prospect, certainly had a great tournament for Russia. You've also got Nils Hoglander, another Canucks pick, also had a phenomenal tournament as well. On the U.S. side, Shane Pinto, a Senators draft pick, really stood out in my opinion as being one of their top players. Some of the American players like Cole Caulfield, Oliver Wahlstrom, who were returning players, I really expected more from those guys, and the fact that they didn't produce. Not only that, but the roles they were given and how the coaching staff decided to deploy them, I do think played a role in the U.S. not doing better as well. And of course, with the Finns injury, certainly played a big role in how their tournament went. So certainly, like I said, overall a great tournament. So of course, as always, I want to know your thoughts and opinions on all the action here at the tournament, the World Junior Championships. What were your thoughts on the gold medal game? All kinds of entertaining, high-impact action here. And of course, like I said as well, I want to know your thoughts on which players really stood out to you as being the top performers of the tournament. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.